Hi, I'm Eric Peterson, and I'll be presenting today on some of our work with uh, bioluminescence and how bioluminescence works in nature and how we as scientists are able to use bioluminescence for different medical applications and research applications. Our presentations titled From Seaside to Bedside, How Marine Organisms Can Be Used for Diagnostics and Therapeutics. So first, luminescence is just the generation of light. So anything that produces light, like a light bulb or a glow stick, so anything that produces light, you can call that luminescence. So the word bioluminescence, we add the word bio in front, meaning that it comes from a living organism. And I'm sure most are familiar with the fireflies that we see in the summer. That's the most common example of bioluminescence that we are all probably familiar with. So how does bioluminescence happen in nature? So these critters that are able to produce their own light, they have a specific protein called a luciferase, which you can see on your screen here, the blue circle, and a substrate called a luciferin, which when the two come together, they have an enzymatic reaction, which results in light being produced. And here's the more advanced version of the chemical reaction. For example, solanterrazine is converted by the enzyme, light's given off, and you have your byproduct. So there's a lot of organisms. Most are actually deep within the sea. Here's an example of a bioluminescent jellyfish, which will have this type of a protein and the substrate, and it can control when the two come together to produce light. So in nature, there's a large variety of bioluminescent creatures, and they all produce different colors of light across the visible spectrum, going from blue all the way to green, yellow, and red. And here's a couple examples of those species. Most of the marine organisms are going to be blue, and as most people are probably familiar with, fireflies are more of a yellowish green, and there are some more exotic worms and things like that that are actually dark red. And here's an example from one of our collaborators of different luciferins, these bioluminescent proteins in the lab. When you add the substrate, they can produce different colors. So these are proteins that are purple to blue to green and yellow. And actually, I'll do a demonstration. I have a demonstration prepared for this. So I have a couple of different tubes that have these engineered bioluminescent proteins, and they produce different colors of light. Go ahead with. So when you add chemical, the luciferin, light up. Two. Here's a good one. So this is producing its own light, and this is a green variant. It's a very bright one. Do you want to move the camera over here? There. This one started up. So this one is a blue example of blue bioluminescence. Hopefully you can see. This one barely shows up on the camera. There. For contrast, next to the very bright green one. Let's try another. Right. So what I'm doing now is just adding the luciferin to bacteria that are expressing those proteins that I was talking about, the luciferase, and it will create the bioluminescent reaction. Here's another blue one. This one's a lot brighter. Hopefully you can see it. There's a lot better example of the blue next to the green variants. All right, can now switch. Sharing. All right, so I just demonstrated an example of doing this in real time where you have the different colors. So I had this middle blue one and this green one here. So in nature, bioluminescence can be observed most prominently in the ocean, with approximately 75% of species in the ocean being able to produce some form of bioluminescence, like this jellyfish that I was talking about. And here's a graph kind of showing that at different depths of the ocean. The blue on the left are the ones that are bioluminescent organisms, and the ones in the gray here are ones that are actually not bioluminescent. So it's just a visual demonstration of how many creatures in the ocean are actually bioluminescent. So how do scientists discover organisms like these? Here's an example of a video that was taken by a collaborator of ours from Nathan Shaner's lab. He's at UCSC. They actually go diving on coral reefs to find animals like this. So you see, these are actually coral on the coral reefs, and they're looking for ones that are fluorescent. Actually, looking for are the ones that they're going to take samples from. They can identify the unique proteins that are responsible suitable for they do similar work with bioluminescence. Here's another video of the same coral reef during the daytime versus at night. So you can see it looks very different. And so on the topic of scientists identifying these various deep sea organisms that are bioluminescent, here's an example of one of the ones that I just showed live. The bluish teal. This is from a Ophlorus is the name of the organism. It's a small shrimp that lives very deep in the sea. And I have a link to a video here. This QR code, if you scan it, will take you to the video that I'm about to show on BBC's website. Share the screen. Go. So this is a clip from the show called The Blue Planet.
Bioluminescence is useful in escape as well as attack.
So this is
a
the shrimp
senses a threat.
Protein that I just showed you.
It spins in the water, releasing a bioluminescent glue. This acts like a burglar alarm, startling the attacking fish and leaving it illuminated in the dark and vulnerable to its own predators. These twinkling lights in the darkness are produced by copepods. They probably flash like this to communicate with one another and confuse their predators. The most sensitive eyes in the ocean belong to an ostracod called Gigantocypris. It's the size of a pea, but that's enormous for an ostracod. Copepods are a favorite prey, and it actively searches for their flashes in the darkness. But this copepod has a way of confusing a hunting Gigantocypris. It discharges a packet of bioluminescent liquid. The flash is delayed, like a depth charge. Spinning, confused in the water, Gigantocypris chases after the flashes. And the copepod slips away unseen into the darkness. The ultimate bioluminescent defense mechanism has to be the light show created by the deep-sea jellyfish Periphylla. That, presumably, is the way it scares away its enemies.
All right, so that was just an example of different marine organisms that all use bioluminescence for different purposes. And some of those we actually use for research. For example, the first shrimp in that video is what I was just demonstrating, and it has a lot of different research applications. So if you want to check out that show, it's called The Blue Planet, and it's actually, last I checked, it's available on Netflix. They have a lot more sea critters that are bioluminescent like that, and it's very interesting to watch. So here, I have another demonstration prepared. This is actually a pre-recorded video I did the other day, but I brought these with me to share. So these are called dinoflagellates. They're a type of plankton that lives on the surface of the ocean. They're photosynthetic organisms. And at night, you can see the waves in the ocean. When they roll through, all of the plankton glow. If you want to get the lights. Oh, and share the screen. So on the virtual booth, we'll have a link to where you can actually buy these and do a activity with them. Hopefully they'll light up today. Can't quite see them. I just got these ones this week, so they're not quite healthy enough yet. You can get the light. That's why I did the pre-recorded video just in case. So I'll just show that one more time. So the little plankton, they're kind of finicky to grow at home. They only produce light in about the 1 to 2 hour, a couple hour windows after it gets dark. So these ones I've been keeping with a lamp on at night so I can do demonstrations during the day. So again, there will be a link to this on the virtual booth to where you can do an at-home learning activity to teach about bioluminescence for grade school age kids. Go to the next. And here is another example of bioluminescence in nature. This is a fungus that produces its own light. I'm not sure if anybody knows the purpose of fungal bioluminescent yet. This picture was taken by a collaborator again. And here are QR codes for links to where you can get these for these bioluminescent critters for educational purposes. I got them from Carolina Scientific, but there's a variety of other places that you can buy things like these dinoflagellates that when you grow them correctly, you can just shake the bottle that they're in and they will glow. And the other one is for a link to that educational resource for teaching kids about bioluminescence. And there's also entertainment value for bioluminescence. There's actually a company that makes their own squirt guns that it uses the same principle that I was talking about, where there's an enzyme and a substrate, and when you add the two, just like I did in the demonstration earlier with the blue and the green bioluminescence, so this one, when you squirt the gun, the two combine and it squirts out a stream of bioluminescent water. And again, here's a link to that. Another entertainment value of bioluminescence that I found is bioluminescent food. Associated with the same company, you actually can't buy it in the US, but it's available in Europe. So this is a picture of some bioluminescent whipped cream that was used on a cake at a birthday party, of course, of scientists who work with bioluminescence. So I actually ate that cake a couple of years ago. And here's for research applications of bioluminescence in the lab. Here are, again, the same luciferases that we work with here at MSU for engineering into functional proteins that can be used for neuroscience research. And here's another quick video demonstration of bioluminescence in the lab. Sorry, it's blurry. I took this one with my iPhone. So this is, again, a blue light emitting luciferase. So on to some of the research applications that we do in our lab here at MSU. And this is what I've been working on for the last couple of years, is to make bioluminescent proteins that can be used to image neuronal activity. So here's just an illustration. This is the bioluminescent protein was actually from that deep sea shrimp that I was talking about earlier. So the idea here is that if there's an area of the brain that you want to study, you can use light to study neuronal activity, given that the bioluminescence from the way that we engineer these, it increases the amount of light it's giving off when there's an increase in brain activity. So here's just a quick example of, this is some cells that are expressing one of these bioluminescent proteins. This is taken under a microscope. So these individual dots here are individual cells that are expressing the protein in the picture here that is sensitive to glutamate, which is the most common excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. So a lot of neuroscientists are very interested in glutamate dynamics. So as you can see in the video, at one point, all of the cells start getting brighter. That's when there's an increase in glutamate in those cells. So this is what I'm actively working on in my research. And the next step will be to actually use this in brains to study neuronal activity. And onto the medical applications for bioluminescence. So in addition to using bioluminescence to study brain activity, we can actually use bioluminescence to control brain activity. And I'll just quickly summarize the project that I worked on previously, which was to use bioluminescence to stimulate neurons non-invasively for spinal cord injury therapy. And I did this preclinical research in rodent models. And here's just a quick illustration. The blue part is the bioluminescent component, and it can activate a light-sensitive channel, which in summary can cause neurons to become more active. And here's an example of imaging bioluminescence in the spinal cord of rodents. So it's this protein is actually being expressed in the neurons of the rats. So you can see over time, it produces light after adding that second component that I was talking about earlier, the luciferin. And here's just a quick summary of recovery from spinal cord injury when they're treated. The blue line here is when they're treated with the bioluminescent driven stimulation. And then the green line is when the untreated group, where they're not receiving the bioluminescent stimulation. So the takeaway from this is that the ones that do receive stimulation are able to walk, while the other ones were not. So I think this has promising applications for being used in patients in the future, or similar approaches for stimulation. So just in summary, I'd like to acknowledge all of the people that have helped us in our lab and our collaborators. And most importantly, the funding source for our outreach is from the National Science Foundation, who also funds our research on the bioluminescent indicators for imaging brain activity.